The Buffalo Bills finally paid James Cook. I think it's a bit of an overpay. I'll explain on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the data queen, Michelle Majuk. On today's episode, we are going to talk about teams that we can't wait to see in week 2 of the preseason, which means we have our eye on the New England Patriots. Also, there are some big injuries at practices around the NFL on Wednesday. Miami, Cleveland, we'll talk about those, but we'll start with the big deal that happened on Wednesday morning between James Cook and the Buffalo Bills. Before we dive into it, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. Thank you for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. But with that being said, Michelle, we did get the deal that everyone's kind of been waiting on. James Cook has been doing a hold-in for a little while with the Bills, and then finally they're able to strike gold. My guy Joe Marino from Locked On Bills breaks it down.
The drama is over, and we have a resolution. The Bills and James Cook reached a 4-year, $48 million contract extension with $30 million guaranteed. And folks, this was a process that involved James Cook using social media to make known his salary desire, sitting out voluntary workouts, reporting to training camp on time, and practicing in full for several practices before abruptly beginning a week-long hold-in before the Bills and Cook finally got a deal done. The $12 million average annual salary slots James Cook sixth among NFL running backs, but the big win for Cook on this deal is the guaranteed money coming in at $30 million, the third most among NFL running backs. Number one, of course, is Saquon Barkley at $36 million guaranteed, and then it's top 10 pick Ashton Jeanty with the Raiders, who's number 2 at $35.89 million on his fully guaranteed rookie deal. While running back contracts can be tricky, there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic about this deal aging well for the Bills, starting with the low mileage on James Cook's tires entering the NFL. Cook turns 26 in September and logged only 297 touches across his 4 seasons in college at Georgia, which should help with his longevity and his durability.
Michelle, I know that the last time we talked about this, sounded like you were a fan of getting this deal done and paying Cook what needs to be paid. You think this is a good move for Buffalo?
I really, really do. And I think they got him on a really nice deal. He wanted more than the $12 million a year that they ended up giving him. He was looking towards $15 million. I know he got a decent amount of guaranteed money, and he said only behind, Saquon Barkley and Ashton Jeanty, but you have to also, it's a 4-year contract. So, Jonathan Taylor's getting $26 million guaranteed on a 3-year contract. Derrick Henry, $25 million guaranteed on a 2-year contract. Christian McCaffrey, $24 million guaranteed on a 3-year contract. So, over 4 years, it is still less than these top guys on average. And I think I know you don't think he's a special running back. I actually really think he's a top tier running back in the league.
Yeah, I guess that's where I ultimately land on any conversation that involves James Cook. I think this was a bit of an overpay. Again, I know that based on the years, but we don't know that he's going to make it through all 4 years of that guaranteed contract. So being up, over Derrick Henry, over Christian McCaffrey, over Bijan Robinson, over Jonathan Taylor, like you said, I think all of those guys are a better running back than James Cook if you put it 1-to-1. Jonathan Taylor, you could probably have a debate against, but I guess I'm just surprised that they went this far with the guaranteed money. But at the end of the day, I think knowing that, and even like saying in a vacuum that I think it was an overpay for James Cook's talent, like who he is as a person, I just think you can get running back production close enough to him for less money. But
Can
at
I
the end of
say
the day,
why you cannot? Can I interrupt you? I think
Sure.
you're really underrating James Cook. So he has the second highest yards per touch among all running backs with at least 500 touches over the last 2 seasons, behind only Jahmyr Gibbs. He has the 6th most scrimmage yards over the last 2 years among running backs. And right where he's at right now with getting paid with Josh Jacobs and Kyron Williams, like right there tied with him basically. He actually has more scrimmage yards than both of those guys over the last 2 years, despite having nearly 100 fewer touches than both. This is what the Bills have to do, though. If they're going to pay him this money, they have to utilize him more, right? For some reason, they went away from him in the passing game this year after a really good receiving season in 2023. The dude averages 9.1 yards per reception. That's fantastic for a running back. That's very, very high. And in 2023, when they used him in that area, 10.1 yards per reception. Like, that's an elite season for a running back in receiving yards per reception. So they need to trust him more, utilize him more to make him, to make this contract worth it.
Yeah, they certainly do. And look, again, I'm not saying that James Cook is a bad running back. Like, he's clearly a starting running back, a top 10 starting running back. I get that. I just think in the environment he's in with Josh Allen at quarterback and the attention that brings, and then Buffalo does have a strong offensive line, which I think is the biggest component of running back success. I also think that Ray Davis is going to be a good player going forward. And I think that Ty Johnson and Ray Davis together could have been way cheaper, 10% of what you're paying James Cook. And you could get 75, 65, somewhere in there level production. But again, my overall point is where the Bills are at right now and with how good that team is and where they're at in their competition cycle and how they're going for it every single year. I do think that they are a lesser football team if they let James Cook go or traded him or anything like that. So I guess when you're in the position that you are as the Bills, you can afford to maybe overpay to keep some guys around, in my mind, because they're in a position to go for it. And that's what you do when you're going for it. And they're not going to be better this year without James Cook. It would be something they would have to solve if they wanted to get an improvement or at least get level. It wouldn't be something they could solve right now. So this probably is the best route forward, no matter what they intend to do in the future.
Yeah, and honestly, like, James Cook is the first running back to play with Josh Allen that's had really any success. I mean, before James Cook took over here, it was always Josh Allen leading the team in rushing touchdowns and carries and rushing yards. Like, Devin Singletary was just a dude there. Zach Moss flamed out. I mean, running backs weren't really working there until all of a sudden last year when they actually, gave James Cook this chance in, the second half of the 2023 season. But yeah, I think he matters to this team a lot more than maybe people realize.
Well, final question before we move on. James Cook, fantasy, where are you at on him there?
I really do like him as long as they need to give him more targets this year. But he did say he's working on that part of his game this offseason. If he can get more targets, I love him as a top 10 running back this year.
Well, I'm just glad that the situation is resolved before we get to the season. At the end of the day, whether guys get paid, overpaid, this and that, just want to see good football players out on the field. And especially, we're talking about fantasy and things like that. You obviously want to see your best players out on the field. And speaking of fantasy, today's episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before this year. Me, maybe Michelle, are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making their millionth league. Yahoo's been doing this for so long, so many years. They have a great draft day experience. The app is super fun, super easy to use. They have so many different types of game modes, and to celebrate their 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy's Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season right around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, Michelle, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about James Cook getting his big deal with the Buffalo Bills. Thoughts on that? But now we got to turn our attention to the future for a couple of teams because there were some Big injury items that came out on Wednesday for a couple of teams in the AFC that we need to dive into. And number one is the Cleveland Browns. So Shedeur Sanders apparently had an oblique injury in practice after he was set to get the start again in the second preseason game. But just because he was set to start doesn't mean that the Browns are taking him more serious now than they were before, according to my guy Spencer from Locked On Browns.
Remains true. Not much has changed in this quarterback competition, despite the fact that Shedeur put on a great performance on Friday for everybody watching, and obviously the Browns coaches and executives. And I think what it tells me is it confirms what I already sort of said over the weekend. The Browns have a process here. They have a process that they're going through to try to develop certain guys, the rookies, get certain guys ready for the season, the veterans, and they are sticking to that plan as of now.
Can I just say, I do not trust the Cleveland Browns process. I do not trust the Cleveland Browns plan, and it's no surprise to me that the best quarterback for their now and the future, Shedeur Sanders, is buried at number 4 on the depth chart. Like, that does make sense that that's the Browns plan or process, and it also makes sense that that's a bad plan and a process.
It's such a bad plan and process, and it's silly to say we should trust this team. They've had 40 starting quarterbacks since re-entering the NFL in 1999. Phew. 40. Obviously, that's the most in the league because that's absurd. Then next closest is the Bears at 30. So 10 more quarterbacks than anyone else during that time. But they've also had 8 different starting quarterbacks since trading for Deshaun Watson and giving him all that money. Like, clearly, they don't know what they're doing. And I agree with you. Like, their only hope is that Shedeur Sanders is good, right? Is actually a really good prospect, and the only reason he fell is because his attitude, and he needed to be humbled. But like, Joe Flacco's not saving you. I'm sorry. Kenny Pickett is so bad. Dylan Gabriel, I guess maybe a 1% chance he hits the NFL. I don't think so. But like, Shedeur Sanders is your only hope, and they're not giving him really any belief that he can truly win this job. But hopefully he can, because Joe Flacco at 40 years old, I'm sorry, I just don't think he's going to get it done.
Yeah, I have a feeling they're just going to be cycling through the quarterbacks, pretending like they have some plan and they're developing these guys the right way and they know what they're doing, and they're just going to be cycling through the quarterbacks, not because they want to, but because they have to, whether it be injuries or they're playing so poorly. Like, they're going to be absolutely riding the bull and pretending that they are the bull. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not, it's not going to go well. And that's where I come to in this segment. This is really what binds the two teams that we're going to talk about together here. Like, the Browns are just doomed this year. Like, there's just no way that it's going to work out, because everything that can make the season salvageable for them, they are rejecting in every sense of the word. It's like they need to take medicine and they refuse to swallow. Like, they just can't do the normal logical thing. And now you're hearing like Myles Garret gets a speeding ticket going 100 miles per hour. And he already said multiple times in media interviews, like, I swear I'm going to slow down. I can't be. And it's just like, I just have this feeling, this eerie feeling, this Lake Erie feeling, I'll say, that the Browns are going to have a bad season, and there's not much that they can do about it. And the only things that could save them, they're not going to be willing to do.
They could very easily go 0-6. So to start the season. So if they want that to be Joe Flacco, throw him out there. And it's the Bengals, the Ravens, the Packers, Lions, Vikings, Steelers. That's their first 6 games. And even the games they do have easy on their schedule, the Dolphins, the Patriots, the Jets, the Raiders, the Titans. Who's to say the Browns are any better than them? Like, that's going to be a 50-50 game. Like, who's going to say how many of those games they win too? So brutal schedule to start the year, no matter who the quarterback is. And also, if your whole plan is to go with Joe Flacco and you say, okay, if we bust, we'll have an early draft pick, then why did you waste 2 draft picks on rookies this year? Like, I don't get it.
It just makes zero sense. And that's why, again, I said I didn't like the Cleveland Browns draft and what they did and some of their moves, even though everybody was calling them a winner out of it. I was like, this is confusing to me. It doesn't really make any sense. But we'll see how it plays out for the Browns. Maybe they have that rough patch at the end of the year. They go to Shedeur after that, and he gets to lead them to the end of the season. We got Cam Ward versus Shedeur Sanders. We need that. That's the only thing that can make Browns-Titans interesting, is for that to be the matchup. So I'm just praying to the football gods that we get that one, for my sake personally, but for the NFL's sake as well. That would be a fun game. But want to move to another team that, I got to tell you, I just think they're in trouble. It's doom for the Miami Dolphins. And in practice on Wednesday, one of the only things that I find exciting about their team, Chop Robinson, their great young pass rusher, got carted off at practice. And look, we don't know the severity of the injury. By the time you hear this, it could come out. It's an ankle sprain. He's out for a couple of weeks. It could be something more. We don't know. But either way, Miami's another team that I just look at everything going on with Tua and Tyreek. And now, did you see the Jalen Ramsey interview where he's saying he wanted to go somewhere where they had a chance to win and that they had respect for the head coach? Like, he's just calling it, I just feel like the vibes in Miami are so bad right now. And like everything is going, the cornerback injuries that they dealt with, like it's all just rough.
I mean, it's not looking great. They're missing a lot of pieces of their defense last year that, exceeded my expectations overall. But now, if Chop Robinson is gone for a while, then that means that 3 of their 4 guys that had at least 5 sacks last year are gone, with Zach Seiler still there. But they will be getting back a couple guys, and Jalen Phillips. But how much can you trust him coming off a torn ACL in 2023, a torn Achilles in 2023, and then a torn ACL in 2024? Bradley Chubb coming back too, but he missed the entire last season with a torn ACL.
He's not the player he was.
No, I do love Kenneth Grant, their defensive tackle they took in the first round.
Yes,
so they have some pieces still, but it's looking rough. It really is. A lot of injuries. And then on the offensive side, you're just praying and hoping that Tua doesn't get concussed and he can stay healthy.
And the problem with that is there are concerns on the offensive line, as my guy Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins talked about.
But we're going to start with the offensive line group as a whole, because I know some of the practice reports that have been coming out, and I had a chance to see before they put pads on. But I did get a pretty fair sampling of 4 practices to be able to kind of get a gauge of where this Dolphins offensive line is at. And the questions that exist right now are a little bit less about how good does Patrick Paul look? Is James Daniels going to get cleared from his Achilles recovery? It's a little bit more about the depth, which is, I think, where a lot of people's initial questions for this unit were not in regards to the depth.
Yeah, I think when you have questions up front and then you have questions with the depth and you have a quarterback that has had injury concerns and then you add in the defense and then the vibe situations that I've talked about and Bradley Chubb saying we were lying about the culture last year a couple of months ago or weeks ago, like the vibes are terrible in Cleveland. The vibes are terrible in Miami. And I cannot envision a path where the Dolphins have a good season.
They might finish last in the division. Like, I get it. The Jets and Patriots are also very risky and could
I
be
like
terrible.
the Jets better than the Dolphins. I'll say it right now. I don't care. Give me the Jets over the Dolphins this year.
I do as well. And I might like the Patriots more than the Dolphins.
Yeah, I think my ego with Mike Vrabel being their coach gets in the way of me giving you that. But I'll definitely go Jets with you.
What's crazy, though, is also talking about this offensive line. They also got rid of, his security blanket last year of those short little passes to Jonnu Smith. Yep. And now, again, they're going to put trust in that Darren Waller. Can stay healthy for even 2 games this year. And outside of that, they really don't have a tight end. So I don't know.
And stay locked in. Michelle, you've ever gone on vacation and you come back and those first couple of days of work, you're like, I would do anything to never work again and go back to the beach. And if you're Darren Waller and you actually have the money to quit, you know what I mean? Like, who's to say Darren Waller plays the whole season? He might just not be locked in and be like, man, this was a bad idea. This team sucks. I don't need this money. I'm out. There's so much. And that's not even questions about him on the field, like how he's playing, how he looks, all that different stuff. I think Patrick Paul looked okay in the preseason game. He's an athletic guy. Aaron Brewer is a small center. The Dolphins just don't look like the physical team that they need to be, that we've talked about, how they kind of lack that physicality. And Kenneth Grant, that pick helps, and I get it, but I still don't see it all the way from the Dolphins. But we mentioned a team in that division that could be better than them, and it's the New England Patriots. And they didn't look like they're going to be better than them in that first preseason game, but they could turn things around. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments. When you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. For me personally, I didn't realize how much money I was spending in like subscriptions every month, but getting to actually visualize it and see it on Monarch, it let me manage it better, and I've been getting into investments, so having that full picture in front of me is super, super efficient. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. All right, Michelle, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Buffalo Bills getting a deal done with James Cook, some injuries in the AFC for teams that seem doomed, quite frankly. But now I want to talk about some teams that we look forward to watching in the preseason. Before we get into it, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first listen. For your second listen, make sure that you check out Locked On Fantasy Football. Locked On Fantasy Football podcast has hosts Vinny Iyer and Kate Majuk. You might recognize the name. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. But with that being said, Michelle, you got your eye on the New England Patriots, and there are some good things in New England, there are some bad things, but one thing that has stood out as a good thing has been Will Campbell, their offensive tackle, and my guy Nick from Locked On Patriots talked about that.
Bedard wrote Campbell was very solid against Washington outside that sack fumble play. Certainly finished well at times. You can tell Campbell is well schooled and his fundamentals are sound compared to Wilson. Campbell knows how to play, just needs to keep learning. And Campbell has consistently been good during the team reps. And if you tell me that you've got, at least average pass protection from Campbell, and you think he's going to be a great, maybe even elite run blocker, then he should be a solid starting left tackle for the next 10 years. He doesn't have to be great in pass protection. If he's good, if he's average, and then gives you that element in the run game where he's just an absolute mauler and terrific in that phase of offense, you're talking about a guy who's going to be rock solid for 10, 12, 14 years at left tackle.
I'm not so certain I agree with the philosophy of being a really good run blocker and an okay pass blocker and that being a top-tier offensive tackle. I think it's the other way around of what you're really looking for. So I have questions about Will Campbell, but Will Campbell is probably the least of the Patriots' offensive concerns right now.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Will Campbell. I'm really excited to see this whole starting offense together and vibing. And we didn't really get to see that in week 1, right? Drake May only got to play 2 drives. He fumbled and lost the fumble, or got sacked, lost the fumble on the first drive.
Yeah, it was ugly.
Second drive, it was a short field. Washington missed a field goal. Travion Henderson had an 18-yard run, his only run of the day. And then there was a face mask that got them all the way to the Commanders' 28. Drake May had some scrambles, a short little dump off, but then got a 5-yard touchdown. I want to see them all together, though. I want to see more of this unit. I think they need to gel more. And then also, I'm so interested because Vegas has the Patriots at 8.5 wins for their over-under. 8.5. That's wild after they went 4-13 last year. But Vegas they don't just put out stupid numbers, really.
Right.
So what do they know that we don't? So that makes me very interested. And Drake May showed promise last year. I really think he did with very little around him. He was working with nothing. So I'm excited to see what he can do.
See, I'm excited to see it, but not because I necessarily believe that it'll be good. I have major questions about Mike Vrabel and him picking the right people to develop a young quarterback. I know that we saw some good stuff from Mac Jones for a little while with Josh McDaniels, but I'm just not certain that that's the proper environment for a quarterback to succeed. So that is a curious over-under, very curious to see how they work out because I could see it going really bad on offense, but at the same time, they could also be really good if Vrabel has those guys ready to play because they do have some talent out there.
Yeah, and let Kyle Williams play more with Drake May.
He
too,
looked
because,
gross in some of his releases. They look nasty.
yeah, like nasty good. I thought you were saying
Yes,
that.
yes.
Yeah.
No, they were good.
He gets 4 targets in the first preseason game, 0 receptions, but they're all from Josh Dobbs. Let him play with Drake May, get some targets, see what he can do. But I think he needs to be a starter. Like, what Demario Douglas and Kayshon Boutte are. They're nothing that's going to be a difference maker. Let Stephon Diggs and Kyle Williams work and actually see if they can be a good duo.
Yeah, guys who can get open quick for a young quarterback so he can get the ball out of his hands. Where the offensive line, Will Campbell, good player, but the offensive line is still a major question for the New England Patriots. So you want to get the ball out of your hands quick if you're Drake May. But another team that I'm watching for is the New York Giants. They were just exciting last week. Like Jackson Dart's throwing the ball around. People are starting to be like, why are we playing Russell Wilson? Like, let's just play Jackson Dart, you know what I mean? And then Abdul Carter looked nasty. I thought it was funny. Abdul Carter tweeted he's not cutting his hair until he gets a sack. Sorry if he looks rough, is what he said. I thought that was super funny. I think both those guys were really impressive. And the Giants are a team who I said throughout the offseason, we talked so much Giants because they were in the quarterback market and all of that. Like Andrew Thomas, pretty good player. Malik Neighbors, pretty good player. That pass rush could be pretty good. Like the Giants are a team that I think, like the Giants and the Raiders are my 2 teams right now in the conferences who most likely will have 7 or less wins, but could be frisky and could be 8 or 9 win teams if things fall right. So I'm just excited to see the Giants young guys play again.
I am very excited to see the young guys play again. And but what's not fun is watching Russell Wilson play. Like nothing about that was fun. I want to see Jackson Dart out there. I do think they're going to start Russell Wilson. They already said that week 1. Yes. I don't necessarily think that's the worst thing because their beginning schedule is so incredibly hard. I think when Jackson Dart takes over, it'll be maybe week 9, week 10, because it goes Commanders, Cowboys, Chiefs, Chargers. They have one easy game against the Saints that maybe they can win, but then it goes Eagles, Broncos, Eagles, 49ers. Yeah, it's a brutal schedule. So I do think Russell Wilson loses a bunch of games. Maybe they throw in Jameis Winston for a game or 2 for no reason whatsoever. And then Jackson Dart will get his chance the last, maybe after their week 14 bye. Maybe we'll get to see him play the last 4 games.
Maybe if you're Brian Daboll, maybe that's the right way to keep your job. You don't want to play Jackson Dart too early because then people will see him and maybe he'll have a bad couple of last games because people finally saw him. Just keep the powder dry, do something crazy, wait until the last month of the season, roll him out there. He looks good for 4 games and you're going to get your job again next year no matter what, whether it's flash in the pan, smoke and mirrors or not. So that might be the best way to do it. But either way, I'm excited to see how it plays out with New York. But that's going to do it for us today, today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk. As we tell you every single episode, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there.
Bye, y'all.